In a quiet valley, far from the noise of kings and cities, there once lived a man whose name the world no longer remembers. No statue was ever built for him, no book carries his words, yet the few who met him said that speaking to him felt like standing before time itself, silent, vast, and endlessly deep. He lived alone, in a small hut made of stone and wood, beside a stream that never stopped flowing. Each morning he would sit near the water, close his eyes, and listen, not to the world, but to something within. They say he once studied under great teachers. He learned about the stars, about the mind, and about the endless search for truth. But one day, he simply stopped. He walked away from everything, from books, from crowds, from the idea of being known. He said only one thing before leaving: truth cannot be found in noise. Years passed. Seasons changed. The valley forgot him, but he did not forget himself. Every day he woke up before sunrise. He would light a small fire, make a cup of warm tea, and sit facing the east. When the first light touched the hills, he would whisper, "The day is not new, only I must be." His days were slow. He wrote nothing. He spoke little, but he observed everything: the wind and the grass, the way stones rested beside the river, the way clouds formed and vanished like passing thoughts. Many travelers came and went through that valley, but few noticed him. Sometimes a lost shepherd would see smoke rising from the hut and wonder who lived there. Sometimes a young man seeking wisdom would knock on the door, hoping to find a teacher. The old man would open the door, smile softly, and say, "You already carry what you're searching for." Then he would close the door and return to silence. He was not famous. He was not rich. He had no disciples, no followers, no name carved in stone, and yet those who met him never forgot him. They said his eyes held no judgment, only stillness. A stillness that made them question their own lives. He would often say to himself, "The world runs fast, chasing shadows, but even shadows disappear when the light fades." Sometimes he would walk to the top of the nearby hill at night and look at the stars. He didn't look for patterns or constellations. He simply looked. He once whispered, "If a man cannot sit quietly beneath the stars, he has not yet begun to live." As the years passed, his beard turned white, his hands rough and steady. He did not fear age. He said, "Time does not take from me. It returns me to what I always was, a moment." He planted trees that he knew he would never see grow tall. He built a small bench beside the river for travelers who would come long after he was gone. He left behind no monument, only presence. Sometimes the wind would carry his voice softly through the valley. Not words, but hums, deep, gentle sounds of peace. Those who heard it said it felt like the earth itself was breathing through him. And though he lived in solitude, he was never lonely. He said, "Loneliness is not being without people. It is being without purpose." When people asked why he had left the world, he said, "I did not leave. The world left itself. I only stayed still." Years later, a traveler wrote in his diary, "I met a man who spoke less than 10 words, but in his silence, I heard everything. He became known only as the Forgotten Philosopher, a man who did not teach through books, but through stillness, a man who proved that wisdom is not found in saying more, but in needing less. As the world outside built empires and broke them, as kings were crowned and forgotten, he sat by his river, unmoved. He once said, "When I was young, I wanted to change the world. Now I only wish to understand it. And the more I understand, the less I need to speak." The years passed, quietly and unnoticed. The valley grew older, and so did he. But age for him was not a burden, it was a teacher. He often said, "The world counts years by how much it forgets. I count them by how much I understand." One day, as he sat beside his river, a young man stopped by. He was lost, both on the road and in his heart. He asked the philosopher, "Why do you live alone? Don't you fear the silence?" The old man smiled. "The silence does not scare me," he said softly. "It is the noise that used to frighten me. The endless voices of people who do not listen, even to themselves." The young man didn't understand. He waited for more words, but none came. The philosopher simply turned his eyes back to the flowing water and said, "Watch the river. It speaks to those who stop talking." The young man sat there for hours, but the old man said nothing more. Before leaving, the traveler whispered, "You have taught me nothing." And the philosopher replied, "Then you have learned everything." After that day, the philosopher didn't see the young man again. But sometimes, when the wind carried distant laughter, he smiled and said, "He found it." Every evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, he would walk to the same old tree and sit beneath it. He never prayed in the way others did. He simply breathed slowly and said, "Today I did not speak a single lie, not to the world, not to myself." He believed truth was not a sentence, but a way of being. He believed peace was not found in escaping the world, but in understanding it enough to no longer be its prisoner. He once wrote on a stone with a piece of charcoal, "The more I learn, the less I argue." When rain washed the words away, he smiled. "That's how knowledge should end," he murmured. He had no students, but sometimes children from nearby villages would come to the edge of the forest and watch him. They were curious about the silent old man who sat still for hours. He would never call them closer. He believed that wisdom was not something you could hand to another. It had to grow inside them like a seed. He often said to himself, "A seed does not shout to become a tree. It grows in silence." There were days when storms shook the valley, lightning cracked the sky, and trees fell in the forest. His hut trembled in the wind, but he did not move. He sat by the small flame inside and whispered, "The world outside is loud because the hearts inside are restless." When the storm passed, he walked outside and looked at the broken branches. He gently placed them near the river and said, "Even in their fall, they serve the earth." As he grew older, his movements became slower, but his eyes brighter. He began to see beauty in things most people ignored: the cracks in the wall, the dust in sunlight, the shadow of a bird passing by. He once said, "When you stop wishing for greatness, even the smallest things become sacred." There was a rock near his hut where he would sit during sunset. He called it the listener. He said that stone had heard more truth than any man ever spoke. Sometimes he would rest his hand on it and whisper, "If I disappear, remember what I tried to say through my silence." He knew the world outside no longer remembered him. Empires had risen and fallen. New kings ruled lands he once knew. But none of that mattered. He said, "To be remembered is to be trapped in someone else's memory. To be free is to exist without needing to be known." Still, deep inside, he carried a quiet hope that someday someone would understand why he chose silence over fame. One winter evening, as snow began to fall, he sat near his fire and thought of his youth. He whispered, "I chased meaning when I was young. Now I see meaning was always chasing me." He looked at his old hands,
worn and steady. He smiled softly and said, "These hands once built dreams. Now they build peace." He was not sad. He did not miss the world he had left. He found joy in simplicity, in boiling water, in fixing his roof, in watching the first snow melt. Sometimes, when he walked near the forest, birds would follow him. He said, "They are not following me. They are following the calm." And when night came, he would light his last candle and speak to the flame. He said, "You burn without fear. Teach me to live like you." His voice grew weaker with time, but his silence grew stronger. It filled the valley like a living thing, gentle, unbroken, infinite. And though no one spoke his name, the valley began to change. The people nearby became quieter, more patient, more kind. They did not know why, but somewhere they felt his presence. The forgotten philosopher had become something larger than a man. He had become a way of seeing the world, slow, calm, and endlessly thoughtful. He once said to himself, "When I am gone, let the wind carry my words. Let the river hold my silence. That will be enough." And with that, another day ended. Another quiet day in the life of a man the world had already forgotten. Winter grew older, and so did he. The air in the valley was colder now. The river still flowed, but slower, as if even time was beginning to rest. His steps had become short and heavy. He no longer walked far. He spent most of his days sitting by the fire, watching the smoke rise and fade into nothing. One morning, he woke before dawn. The world was silent. No birds, no wind, just the deep breath of the earth. He looked around his small hut and smiled. Nothing had changed for years. The same chair, the same cup, the same little window through which light would always enter first. He whispered, "This is enough. A man needs no more than what peace can fill." He opened the door and stepped outside. The frost sparkled on the grass. The first rays of sunlight touched the river. He sat on his usual rock, the listener. For a long time he said nothing. Then, softly, almost to himself, he said, "All my life I searched for truth. Now I see, truth was not a destination, but a way of walking." He remembered the people he had met long ago, the travelers, the seekers, the lost souls. He wondered if they ever found peace. But then he smiled and said, "Peace cannot be found. It can only be remembered." The valley had become his teacher, the wind his scripture, the silence his prayer.
He thought about death, but not with fear. He said, "Death is not an ending. It is a hand reaching out from the dark to take you home." He no longer tried to remember who he was before, the student, the wanderer, the philosopher. He said, "Names are for those who still believe they are separate from the world. I am no longer a name. I am what remains when the name is gone." One evening, as the sun turned gold, he saw a group of children playing by the river. They were laughing, chasing each other, throwing stones into the water. He watched them silently. Their laughter echoed through the valley like bells of life. He smiled. That sound is proof that the world still breathes. He turned his eyes toward the mountains and whispered, "I am grateful, not for what I achieved, but for what I learned to let go." That night, he lit his final candle. He placed it beside him and sat quietly, cross-legged, facing the river. The flame flickered, soft and small. He watched it dance in the air and said, "Even in stillness there is motion. Even in silence, there is meaning. Hours passed. The candle burned low. He whispered, "I am ready, not because I have finished living, but because I have learned how to begin again." Then, with one slow breath, he closed his eyes. Outside, the wind moved gently through the valley. The candle's flame trembled, then steadied, as if refusing to die too soon. By morning, the hut was quiet. The fire had gone cold. Only the soft sound of the river remained. A traveler passing by noticed the open door. He entered and found the old man sitting there, still, peaceful, eyes closed, a faint smile on his face. Beside him lay a single note, written on a small piece of bark. It read, "Do not search for me in names or in graves. I am in the wind that cools your face, in the silence between your thoughts, in the peace you feel when you stop wanting more. I was never lost, I was always here." The traveler took the note, stepped outside and looked at the valley. He felt the air, soft, calm, alive. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I understand." And from that day on, people who passed through that valley spoke of a strange calm that filled their hearts. They said it was as if the earth itself had remembered something long forgotten. They called it the Valley of Silence. No one built a temple there, no one made a statue, no one wrote a book, but those who stayed for a while said the same thing, that they felt something invisible watching over them. Not a man, not a spirit, but a feeling that said, "Be still, you are enough." And maybe, even now, if you sit in silence long enough, you might hear him too, not through words, but through peace.